Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this hour-long webinar on personal values, core values. Before we begin, I would just like to mention that having a pen and paper will be a handy thing for today, because we're going to do a little bit of reflective work today, and it will be helpful for you to be able to write some things down. If you want to participate in that way, you're certainly welcome just to listen if that's more what you would like to do. I'm taking this session on my own, mainly because this area of values and personal values has been an area I've been very interested in and have been reading about and reflecting about in myself over the past couple of years, as I've started to identify how valuable values and knowing my values is to me. I've got a PowerPoint I'm going to share, which is part of my style, which will help us keep on track. So yes, I think that in this exploration I've been doing over the last couple of years, that what I've found identifying my personal values more clearly has meant for me is that guidance system for being able to assess, I suppose, whether or not I do something, whether or not I get involved in this committee or that group, or whether I interact with this person, or whether I have a big veggie garden this year or a little tiny one. Decisions big and small come out of this consultation with myself in terms of, how does this fit with what really, really motivates me? Is this something that I want to do? So that's a big clue to where values come from. And I think that as we identify these personal values more clearly, there is a growing confidence. It's almost like values are connected in some way into our intuitive self as well. So, there's a confidence in the decisions that I make that come really out of my heart. They come out of my deeper sense of knowing that this is true to me. This resonates with me. I think the value of values as well very much is, the more I know my own values, the more I embody them in the things that I do, the way I live my life. And to me, when I meet embodied people, when I meet people who are walking their talk, you can feel it. And that's an inspiring thing to me. There's an authenticity that, well, authenticity happens to be a very high value for me. So maybe that's why it appeals to me so much. And I look at the world we're living in right now, the world of fake news, and the world of, fear that's engendered by the media, the social media world that especially our kids are so entwined with, and receiving so much of their information from, and knowing that that world is not necessarily motivated by the highest values. There's often such a sort of avaricious quality, or a really commercial quality, a manipulative quality to these platforms of information. So I'm interested in being an inspiration in my community, in my family, and in my world through my own living, through the message of just me being true to myself. So this is, to me, the core of knowing your core values. So I'm going to share my screen with you now with my little PowerPoint presentation. and very thankful at this point in time for this wonderful technology that allows us to do this. So what do values have to do with it? You can think of the old Tina Turner song, "What's love got to do with it?" Well, what do values have to do with it? What is the power of knowing our core values? So I don't know how clear you are already on your own personal values. This is, again, one of those areas, I think, that in terms of the Stephen Covey habits, it relates to sharpening the saw. It relates to spending enough time with yourself that you can start to really have a sense of what's going on inside. But personal values, they are really one way to spot them, and one way to identify them is to notice that personal values are the things that are really important to us, the characteristics and behaviors that motivate us and guide our decisions. I've got a quote here by a woman named Alice Walker. And she says, "Look closely at the future you are constructing. It should look like the future you are dreaming." And I think, this future that we're dreaming really comes out of what motivates us. The dreams that we have for the future, for ourselves, for our family, for our world, they relate very much to our core values. And as we become more in touch with these things that deeply motivate us, this becomes the way that we act. And in that sense, that's how we construct our future. And, I'm quite interested in the future for us all, and it being a positive one. And everyone has their own personal values, and they can be quite different from each other. I mean, you can see naturally that some people have more competitive sort of nature, and maybe those sorts of achievement and winning are strong values for them. And some people are more about family and connecting with each other. Some people value adventures and getting out into the world, and others are more motivated by having a safe and secure home base. So that's a stronger value for them. So we don't all necessarily have the same values or have to have the same values. But generally across, studies have shown that across all cultures, there's some really fundamental values that tend to be cultural values, like not killing others. That is a fundamental value in pretty much all societies across the world. So we do have those cross-cultural ones, but our own personal ones can be quite a bit more unique to us. They're really deep-rooted systems of beliefs, and they help us determine what's right and what's wrong. If you read up a little more about values, they sort of, there's a few terms, like there's values and morals and ethics. And they're often used somewhat interchangeably, but in my understanding, values are kind of like the core bedrock. They're the very, very foundation. And out of that foundation is where the morals, our moral behavior gets formed. And the way, we have a code of ethics. It's sort of like the code that we enact our moral behaviors from. So sometimes, they can be a little bit in conflict with each other, or they can be what you would call a moral dilemma, perhaps. Like you might have a really strong value around not stealing. Say a person has a really strong value around not stealing. And then What if a daughter couldn't afford the life-saving medicine her dying mother needed, but she somehow had access to a storeroom where the medicine was kept? So, in this instance, her core values might be around not stealing, but, her morality might tell her, I need to protect my mother. So, she's got to find a way to negotiate that. And it may be that she could find a way to accommodate both. So these are sometimes the things that we, aren't so clear cut. And this is why we sometimes need to pause and really consider what it is that we're feeling inside. But I would say that you're likely to feel better if you're living according to your values, and to feel worse if you don't. So I know that many, many years ago, I had what I would call the core value of honesty really seared into my experience. And this is, this is something they say about values, is that this bedrock tends to get laid down very early in our lives and carries, some of those values will carry through the entire life. Some of the values may shift a little bit as you get older. But this particular value of honesty, I remember, happened when I was a wee child. I was only around 6 years old, and a friend of mine and I had gone to the corner store. Our mothers had given us a 5-cent piece each to go and buy some lollies. And I wanted more lollies than my 5 cents would buy me. So I ended up stealing a particular lolly and popping it in my pocket and then spending my 5 cents on some other lollies. And when we got back to this little girl's house, I showed her my booty that I had in my pocket, as well as my bought stuff. And this little girl, who was only 6 years old, who obviously already had this honesty moral very strongly in her, made me go back to the store and return the stolen goods and apologize to the storekeeper. And I still remember that walk of shame, that embarrassment, that huge sense of fear in confronting this situation as such a young little one. But I did it. And ever after, that experience has remained with me. And, I wouldn't say that through my whole life I've been entirely honest, or maybe even that I haven't stolen something along the way. But what I know is that I was aware. I certainly felt the impact of going against that value, of acting against that deep value that had been laid down so early. So that's a bit of a clue. Feeling in alignment with your values is quite different than that going against what might be a core value. So there's some quotes from a few different ones you might recognize, you might not. Mark Mason says, every moment of every day is, just finding my little page here, every moment of every day, whether you realize it or not, you are making a decision on how to spend your time, on what to pay attention to, on where to direct your energy. Our values are constantly reflected in the way we choose to behave. And I mean, I would have to say that one of the strongest elements in developing an awareness of my core values has been taking some time, in that sort of formal mindfulness practice way of tuning in to my inner sort of world, into my inner world, which has been really helpful in noticing more acutely what I'm paying attention to and where I'm directing my energy. and seeing, the impacts of that on myself. And Elvis Presley, values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over everything you do. This can be another clue for developing an awareness of your own core values as well, because we see others, we see how they act, and we know when we feel in alignment with other people and when we don't. You can see the effects of people's actions, and those actions are so often motivated by the deeper values that are there. And Roy Disney, who said, "It's not hard to make decisions once you know what your values are." And Roy Disney was a nephew of Walt Disney, the creator of Mickey Mouse and Disneyland and all of that. And they had 7 core values for their company. So that's an area that Darren might work with in the corporate world, is with companies that develop these values that employees are meant to refer to. But all too often, those values in the corporate culture are, really just sort of pictures on walls and words on mouse mats, and maybe a token cup to take home. They're hollow, in other words, and maybe not really adhered to against the god of commerce and making a buck and all of that. But in the case of Disney, they had some really strong core values: innovation, quality, community, really strong value, storytelling. Well, we've seen the stories that come out of that whole Disney world. Optimism and decency. So they defined some real qualities that were values for them as a company, and obviously they've been hugely successful around the world. So we're going to get into a little bit more of looking at defining personal values. And it's not really super hard to do. It just requires that little bit of time management where you go into that, important but not urgent quadrant again. I think both these webinars are in that quadrant. And you'll feel the value of managing both these areas of emotional intelligence and personal values. So defining personal values is really looking at what makes you feel good in terms of characteristics or ways of behaving in the world, not having a glass of wine or something that might lift your mood, but more what is it makes you feel good really deeply inside. If you maybe offer something into the community in a particular way, does that make you feel good? Or if you interact with your family in a particular way, does that make you feel good? What are the characteristics of what makes you feel good? It's worth reflecting on these things. And you really know when you've gone against some deep personal value, when your actions don't feel good, when you have the sense of not living up to your own vision for yourself. And as I mentioned about that value of honesty being really embedded in my character at such a young age, I really have the kind of little alert alarm bells come up when the potential for being dishonest is there, because sometimes that's the temptation. It's the easy way out. It might more quickly solve a problem or get something done. But I've found the discomfort of sort of acquiescing in that way is not worth it for me personally. Doesn't mean that I still don't tell a little white lie now and then. But increasingly, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I have this one life to live, so why not live it the best I can? So pausing to consider what makes your heart sing is a good way to tune into your core values. So it might be being in nature, the natural world. That can be a value. It might be, you know, having a really beautiful car and that whole freedom that allows you to be able to move out into the world. So, you know, from seeing that having that beautiful car allows you freedom, you might say, okay, well, freedom is a really strong value for me. It might be having a really good conversation with a friend makes your heart sing, really makes you feel good inside. In which case you can see potentially that communication or friendship or connection are motivating values for you. So taking your piece of paper now, we're going to go through a few questions. And I would encourage you as you answer these questions to just sort of have a very open mindset. Don't belabor the answers. I'll give you, I don't know, about 30 seconds per question to consider and reflect on what you'd like to answer. And just see what we come up with at the end. So taking your piece of paper, the first question is, what's important to you in life? I know that's a pretty big question. Just notice, what are the first words that just pop into your head? What's important to you in life? Money, family, time alone. Just take a few moments to write down those answers. Okay, so whatever you've written down is just perfect for right now. We'll go on to the next question. So if you could have any career without worrying about money or other practical constraints, what would you do and why? This is an imagination, an imaginary world where maybe you're just choosing a career. You're not worrying about how things are right now. Just what would you imagine yourself doing? Let's have fun with this. No answer is wrong. It's all just exploration. The why question is often interesting. Why you would choose that. You can always go over these questions and rethink them later or try them out on another day and see what you come up with. Let's look at another one. When you're reading news stories, what sort of story or behavior tends to inspire you? I know I recently read two news stories. One was about a woman named Ronnie Khan, who is the founder of Oz Harvest. That's the company that goes around and collects leftover food from restaurants and events and takes them to homeless shelters. So she is a philanthropist and businesswoman, and her story is so inspiring to me. And I read another one about the cricketer Steve Waugh and how he's turned from finishing up his cricketing days into being a benefactor and a humanitarian with various people in India, young girls, sending them to school, giving them education, etc. So both these people really touched me. So just thinking for yourself, what news stories or what sort of story and behavior tends to inspire you? Okay, so moving on to another question now. What type of story or behavior makes you angry? So just noticing when, some sort of barrier has been breached in you that you feel that sense of anger in a news story or maybe some behavior you see somewhere. Just maybe there's been a recent story. There's been lots of recent stories for me. Okay, so moving on to the next question. These are quite big questions, so don't worry if they seem a bit of a challenge to answer, but what do you want to change about the world or about yourself? Just individual words can be fine, short phrases, just letting whatever comes come, not belaboring it. What do you want to change about the world or about yourself? And then considering for a few moments, what are you most proud of? It could be now, it could be an achievement in the past, it could be someone. So just whatever comes to mind again. It's brainstorming, writing down the first things that come to mind. And then one final question to consider before we move on to the next thing, and that is, when were you the happiest in your life? So maybe you have a particular happy memory that stands out, or a period of life. It might be right now. So just maybe writing down a couple of features about when you were the happiest. A feeling, a word, just whatever comes to mind. Okay, so wherever you're at with your written answers, just letting them be as they are for now. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a list of just words. And it's by no means a comprehensive list. This is a list of, I'll just take you to that list. So it's a list of some personal value words. There's obviously a lot more that could go in there. So if the word that you're thinking of isn't on this list, then just feel free. What I invite you to do is look at what you've just written down as answers to those questions. And maybe just looking at the various words that you've chosen and seeing, if there's a word that stands out in one or more of those answers. Like I'm just thinking of maybe as an example of if you looked at what you were most proud of, and maybe if you wrote down your first paycheck at a part-time job you had as a teenager or something like that. That could be, relate to the quality of independence, earning your own money, or it might be financial security. So there's a few ways of looking at what you've written down. So you can use these words as a kind of maybe a little launching off point, but just looking at what you've written down, answers to those questions, looking at this list, just see if you can find 5 or 6 of these words or words that feel more accurate to you. Just write those down. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do this so that it's not rushed. You might start by writing down 10 or 12 words if you can't whittle it down just yet. And if you're finding it hard to sort of narrow it down to 5 or 6 of these words or other words that come to you, maybe like in that example I just shared with you around the first paycheck, whether it's independence or financial security, you might write down both those words in relationship to that question. And then, if you end up with a longer list, just start to see if one of those is more important to you. So just playing with what comes up for you. Just giving you another few seconds with this. Okay, so whatever you've written down now, you can use that as your starting point. And again, this might be something you'd revisit in a week or so, and just, going through the exercise again, just see kind of how these things hold water for you. And so we're going to prioritize now. these values. So I've written down a couple of paragraphs. So once you've worked out, you may have more than 5 or 6. That's fine if that's the case. But just whatever words you did write down, see if you can sort of order them. Like, what would be at the very top of the list as the absolute main, core value, the one that you really guide your life by. And this will give you an idea of what you want to, or what you tend to spend the majority of your efforts on in your day-to-day life. And and then you can start to look at, you can see that if you chose honesty as a top value, you might start really more deliberately using this to help you make a decision about what to make in a conversation. And here's where that aspect of having a value and acting morally comes into it as well, because honesty as a value can sometimes be a two-edged sword, because sometimes that might involve saying something that could be hurtful, and morally you don't want to hurt someone else. So it may be finding the best way that you can to convey that honest message. So it's all a bit of experimentation and self-exploration. So just working out those sort of order for yourself, playing around with that for another couple of minutes. I'll just give you another sort of 20 seconds to just finalize that order for today. Okay, so we've got one more little piece of reflective writing to do. And that is to do a little bit of more list making. Doesn't everyone love writing lists? But taking your top values now, and you might want to just work with the first 3 or 4 if you've got a big long list. Just looking at, maybe make a heading of whatever the value is in a column. You might want to work with 3 or 4 columns across the page, however you like to do it. So listing your value at the top of that, and then underneath, just considering how you could put those values into practice. Maybe 2 or 3 things under each value that you could enact easily without having to make major changes in your life, but just a statement. Again, this is a statement to yourself, to your world. It's one of those things that does create new neural pathways as we have this intent to come from values. So, so our lives become. So, if even an example, if you chose learning, you might look at how you can take a new webinar a week, or you might say you're going to read a new book a month. You might sign up for a language course or a cooking class or whatever it is that you're interested in learning. So just a few possible actions for each of your values, for 3 or 4 of your top values. I'll just give you another couple of minutes to write your creative list. Being playful with it, not laboring over it. If you've finished your list, I'll just give you another sort of 30 seconds or so. But if you've finished your list, looking back over it, noticing the work you've done, what you've written, perhaps just feeling that little sense of achievement, even of being able to identify these things. And just finishing off your list for another few seconds. So I've written at the bottom of this page that you should end up with a list of possible actions for each value. And then making these possible actions into goals is the next step. So I always think that setting goals is the very best way to do it is start small and keep regular. That's my favorite way of moving towards a goal. So it may be, just as an example, it may be fitness or a healthy body is a value for you, having good fitness. And at the moment you've realized that for whatever reasons you haven't been actioning that value, you haven't actually been bringing that value into your life very much. So you may have written down as actions for physical fitness, starting a jogging regime or joining a gym or attending a gym. So then I would say start small. It might be if going for a daily run is your thing, it's that you just start with getting yourself prepared for a run the next morning by having your running shoes ready by the bed, and getting up in the morning and putting them on and going for a walk around the house. That might be the first goal, starting small, and then maybe building that to adding on, running once around the house or twice around the house, and then building on that step by step by step, so that we don't ever sort of create this sort of cross for ourselves to have to bear, or have to get all guilty about not meeting unrealistic goals. So it's really, starting small with goals that are very achievable, that relate to the actions you want to take to really be living from your personal values. So I've written down here, I've put a link here which will be shared along with this presentation for a really great online values survey as well. And if you explore this area very much more on your own, you'll find that there are a number of values surveys you can take that can help you to kind of identify maybe those top 5 or so values that really are foundational to you. I've done a couple of these different surveys, and I've had slightly different sort of feedback out of these surveys, but this one felt like it really was quite accurate to what I was sensing inside. So you may have to just play around with that a little bit, but we'll send you that link, and I might give you another couple of links as well that you can explore. So I've also got other ways of developing awareness of what makes you tick. And this is a practice that, again, is one of those things that can be a start small and see how you go. Writing might not come naturally to you, but I'd suggest just maybe even starting with a little notebook, and just perhaps using some of the questions on the previous pages, and just picking one of those questions that you might want to just look at on a daily basis, even just as a little personal exercise. What's important to you in life? Maybe you choose that question, and just notice day to day what you want to write down there. Could be a really interesting reflection to just let what wants to come, and see what you notice about the answers that you put down. What feels good, what doesn't feel like it's accurate to you, and also I'd say observing your reactions and responses to the day-to-day of your life, interactions with people in your community, your family, maybe things you see on the television or on your Facebook feed. Just noticing what comes up for you in all of those interactions. These are aspects of being mindful of what is arising without sort of pushing it away, that sort of curiosity, because these are the clues to what our inner workings are. And the more we know our inner workings, the more we can come from that sort of emotionally intelligent place that Darren was outlining in the previous webinar. So another way, of course, I'm very hot on this one, a daily meditation. I've got here choosing a regular period of sitting quietly for 10 to 20 minutes. That obviously is maybe a way too big of a step if you've never engaged in this kind of activity before. So in our webinar on emotional intelligence, I suggested picking a 5-minute window. And it really doesn't need to be complex. It doesn't need to be something that you have to download apps for and have guidance necessarily. It's as simple as just finding a quiet spot to sit at a regular time each day, where you won't be disturbed, you don't have your phone with you, and settling in to your whatever chair or however you're sitting, and then simply bringing your awareness to your breath, moving in and out of your body. And your thoughts will wander, you'll have things arise in your awareness, and each time you notice that, you just practice this sort of return with as gentle and kind an attitude as possible to the flow of your breath. So it sounds again like something like, how can this have an impact? But I guarantee you that if you bring in a really short little period like this on a daily basis, you will feel the impact on your whole life, because this is the part of ourselves we haven't explored a heck of a lot. We've grown up in a culture that is so outwardly oriented all the time, getting to the next thing all the time. So this little purposeful pause can bring such riches, and certainly for me, it's very much helped me clarify the things that are really, really important to me. Another one is conversation and connection with close friends whom you trust and respect. I mean, we are social creatures, and I know that the people that I'm drawn to in my life and the ones that I want to spend time with, it's often because we most likely share similar values, or there is something inspiring about the values that I can sense in this person that I aspire to. Maybe want to develop that quality within myself as well. So it's noticing the people that you're drawn to, that you want to spend time with, and then also just feeling, what is it that comes up in me when I'm with these people? Just knowing that our social connections are deeply, deeply important for informing us and for our foundation of satisfaction in life. And another one, which is really useful, now, if you've never done this before, it might be a great exploration as well, working with a coach or a mentor to help unlock the potential of living a values-based life. So there are many people in this space these days, life coaches, executive coaches, business coaches, mentors of all sorts, mentors in business and community. So this can be really useful as well, particularly from the point of view that often a coach is someone who isn't so close to you and can give you some objective sort of feedback on your observations or what it is. And a coach will also often give you some tasks to work on. So it's a little more of an orderly, stepped out process. So I'd recommend that as a potential way of developing yourself as well. So in conclusion, first of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to step into this important but not urgent area of your life, that quadrant of time management. Knowing that, as women and as intelligent human beings on this planet, that our influence is powerful. Our influence of the way that we live our lives, the way we conduct ourselves, is very important, very impactful. We are influencing our friends, we're influencing our children, we're influencing our community with the way that we live our lives. So the more we can be conscious of what it is we're doing, and come from this place of self-awareness, the more that impact resonates with people. And I have a very strong belief that conscious, um, wise, and self-connected women are one of the absolute key components of keeping this world on track, I suppose. So thank you very much for joining in on this webinar. The links to the surveys and this presentation will be included along with this presentation. Thanks to Kim and Wattle for giving Darren and myself an opportunity to share these thoughts with you. And both Darren and myself are always happy to have any more interaction with you if you have questions or comments. We're always happy to hear them. So all the best to all of you, and look forward to potentially crossing paths with you again in the future. I guess I should stop this share. There we go. So I can wave goodbye to you, and we'll see you again around the traps. Thanks.